I have a new reaction now when people say, what about Bob Dylan? It is such an honor to have been a part of his life and to share that music and to have, loved him and even liked him. And that's a recent change for me.
Joan Baez, once America's most beautiful voice, is now 83, and her life has taken a tragic turn. After decades of battling mental illness, she finally revealed a painful truth. She was sexually abused by her famous father. The folk legend who once dated Bob Dylan and Steve Jobs now lives alone in a treehouse, talks to plants, and finds more comfort in nature than people. She even named one tree, the counselor, saying it listens better than any therapist. It's a jarring chapter for the woman who once sang beside Martin Luther King Jr. But Joan's story began long before her music made history. Her father, Albert Baez, was a brilliant physicist who helped invent the X-ray microscope at Stanford. But what defined him was his conscience. During the Cold War, he turned down defense jobs, refusing to build weapons. Instead, he chose quiet, underpaid work in academia and with UNESCO. Joan later said, "We never had the fine and useless things little girls want. We had a father with a clear conscience." That became her legacy. Her childhood was shaped by constant moves. One of the most eye-opening stops was Baghdad, where her father worked with the university. At just 10, Joan landed in a world of extremes. She watched a beggar beaten by police at the airport and saw people digging through trash, children in the streets, and cruelty toward animals. She read Anne Frank's diary that year and fell sick often. Later, she said, "Our little souls saw the same things and took different things from it. I carried the weight." That year never left her. Back in California, Joan began to notice injustice at home too. Though born in New York, her Mexican heritage made her feel like an outsider. Some kids called her stupid Mexican, but she didn't fully fit in with the Mexican students either. Joan didn't speak Spanish, leaving her caught between cultures. "I was brown and wasn't accepted," she said. But it sharpened her sense of justice. Even then, she knew, the real fight was for Black Americans. That clarity guided her choices. She refused to sing for segregated white audiences in the South, choosing instead to perform at Black colleges, knowing it could cost her career. Around that time, another deep influence entered her life, the Quaker faith. Her family became Quakers when Joan was 8, drawn to their values of peace and justice. Those beliefs became hers. Dinner table conversations often revolved around war, conscience, and right versus wrong. At 15, she heard a speech by Martin Luther King Jr. and cried. Soon after, she defied a Cold War air raid drill at school. That quiet protest landed her in the local paper, and marked the beginning of her activism. Then came the summer of 1959, and a moment that would change everything. At the first Newport Folk Festival, an unknown 18-year-old Joan Baez took the stage barefoot, with a borrowed guitar, and sang just 2 songs with Bob Gibson. Her voice, clear, haunting, unforgettable, stunned the crowd. While legends like Pete Seeger and Bo Diddley played that night, it was Joan everyone talked about. Record labels came calling. Though she'd go on to perform at Newport for decades, it was that single performance that launched her legend. A year later, at 19, she recorded her first album, not in a studio, but in a shabby ballroom at the Manhattan Towers Hotel. She sat on a worn rug between 2 mics, recording while trying to ignore the bingo games in the next room. No frills, just her voice and her guitar. That stripped-down sound became iconic. The album didn't hit right away, but it climbed to number 15 and stayed on the charts for nearly 3 years. She turned down big labels like Columbia and signed with Vanguard, valuing freedom over fame. Years later, the Library of Congress named that record one of America's most important. Before all that, she built her voice, and her courage, on a tiny stage at Club 47 in Cambridge, near Harvard. Her first show was to a nearly empty room, and she was terrified. But there was something about her, mysterious, magnetic. Soon, lines stretched down the block. Her pay jumped from $10 to $25 a night, a big deal for a young folk singer in 1959. Club 47 became her proving ground. The barefoot image that followed her, part mystic, part rebel, started at Newport. She didn't wear shoes, not as a statement at first, but it became one. Her bare feet came to symbolize authenticity in a polished, packaged industry. People began treating her like a saint, even though she never asked to be. "I am not a saint. I Am a Noise, Joan once wrote. The weight of perfection followed her for years. But in her 80s, she finally let go. In Paris, she danced barefoot, not for applause, but for herself. Free at last. Everything shifted in 1961, when Joan, already a star, saw a scruffy young Bob Dylan perform in Greenwich Village. His voice was rough, but when he sang Song to Woody, she felt undone. It made me fall apart inside, she said. Their connection deepened soon after, when he played with God on our side at a party. She realized he wasn't just talented, he was different. Over the next few years, Joan used her platform to lift him up. In 1963, she invited him to join her on stage at Newport in front of 10,000 people. The crowd didn't love him yet, but she did. She toured with him, shared her stage, and gave his songs to her fans. At a concert in Queens, over half her set was Dylan's music. Bobby Dylan says what a lot of people my age feel but cannot say, she told them. When they performed at the March on Washington, the same day Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech, Dylan's status as a voice of the movement was undeniable, and Joan had helped make that happen. But fame changed things. By 1965, Dylan left her behind. He invited her on a UK tour, then refused to let her perform. She wandered backstage, hurt and confused. Then, suddenly, he married Sarah, who was already pregnant. Dylan broke my heart, Joan later said. I was just stoned on that talent. Despite their deep connection, Joan didn't follow Dylan's lead. He wanted control, not a partner. In 1968, Joan Baez released Any Day Now, an album of Dylan's songs, including her acclaimed version of Tears of Rage. The album helped her process the loss of her relationship with Dylan. At 22, she sang We Shall Overcome at the March on Washington, a key moment in her activism. By 1965, she had joined the Selma to Montgomery March and helped push the Voting Rights Act into law. She refused to perform at segregated venues and protested the Vietnam War by refusing to pay taxes. In 1972, Joan went to North Vietnam, documenting the destruction from bombings. She also founded the Institute for the Study of Nonviolence to teach peaceful protest. Her activism sparked a rift with Jane Fonda in 1979 over Vietnam, showing how even strong alliances can falter. In 1991, Joan revealed her father had sexually abused her, a painful truth she faced in therapy. Joan battled mental illness, including dissociative identity disorder, affecting her relationship with her son. In the late 70s and early 80s, she turned to pills until President Carter's ban on Quaaludes helped her begin to recover. Joan's therapy journey began at 16, but it wasn't until her 50s that she faced the hardest memories through hypnosis. Despite the difficulty, therapy brought her peace. In 1970, after her breakup with Bob Dylan, Joan surprised many by recording One Day at a Time, an album of country music inspired by her husband David Harris, who was imprisoned for refusing to fight in Vietnam. The album was a bold personal and political statement. Joan also ventured into classical music in the late 60s, collaborating with Peter Schickele on 3 experimental albums. In 1974, she released Gracias a la Vida, a Spanish-language album honoring Chilean singer Victor Jara. In 1982, Joan began a relationship with Steve Jobs, lasting 3 years. Though it didn't lead to marriage, they remained close. Joan later thanked him in her memoir for encouraging her to use a word processor. Joan also revealed a significant part of her life, a 2-year romantic relationship with a woman named Kim in the 60s. She spoke about it in her 2023 documentary I Am a Noise, describing it as a pivotal experience that shaped her understanding of love. In her later years, Joan found solace in nature, talking to a tree she named the Counselor. She built a treehouse, spending summers there to connect with the peace it provided. She also maintained a ritual of dancing barefoot every morning, which lifted her spirits. At 84, she shocked audiences by dancing live on television, demonstrating her joy and rebellious spirit. At 77, Joan discovered painting, holding her first solo art show in 2017. Her work focused on activists and freedom fighters, and by 2021, she had featured portraits of figures like Kamala Harris and Dr. Fauci. Through art, she continued her fight for justice. Her 2023 documentary I Am a Noise revealed her struggles with childhood abuse, dissociative identity disorder, and depression, offering an intimate look at the woman behind the fearless public figure. In 2024, Baez published her first poetry book, When You See My Mother Ask Her to Dance. The collection was deeply personal, with poems exploring childhood memories, healing, and growth. It also contained a quiet, respectful poem about Bob Dylan, an acknowledgement of the complex, lasting connection between them.